All right, so next up, I'm so excited. We're all anxious to hear the most latest stats. So Megan Aller has been in the business for 5 years. Is that right, Megan? Okay, so we got a typo there. I was like, I've known you for 10, so I don't know how that's possible. For 15 years and is a top producing real estate analyst and title rep at First American. Welcome, Megan Aller. She's not going to shout? Yeah. Come on, just shout first.
Rather than screaming numbers at you, I figured I'd use a microphone because it seems to come across just a little bit more gently that way. You guys have all had a rough start to the year, so we could probably stand up and give each other a back rub and have back rub circles going around here, around the podium. So it's been a really rough start to the year for you guys, but it is actually a little bit less frantic than what we were a year ago. I went through and I crunched all of the numbers for you going through the end of March, so I was in a fury and a tizzy trying to get everything done for you guys today. I went through and put together your market dynamics report for you, and in the market dynamics report, what you'll find is that our active inventory came up by 1.7% month over month, and I want to change your idea about talking about active inventory, because the story out there has been that inventory is so low, and it isn't that inventory has been so low, it's that its inventory is moving so fast, I don't have time to capture it as an active listing count. Basically what I do is on the 4th of the month at 10 o'clock in the morning, I run my schedule like the military. It's the same time every month, the 4th of the month at 10 o'clock in the morning. I go in and I take an active snapshot count and say, how many active listings are there if I wanted to take a client out and show them every home that was on the market today. Based off of that data for detached single family, we had about 1,325 homes that were available for sale. Now that is up from where we were 1 year ago by 17.7%. So the good news is that we know that our buyer pool started out fast and furious that second weekend in January, while our seller pool is now coming to market earlier and earlier this year so that they're getting their homes to market sooner. I'm going to go over something called an total showable properties count with you in a little bit, but there's a lot more properties out there than what we're actually talking about and what the media is reporting on in our marketplace. What was interesting to see is that pending transaction count, while it went up 10.7% from February to March, it's down from 1 year ago by about 25% in both the attached and the detached markets. So the market's moving really fast, but there are fewer transactions that are to be had out there in the market this year. Month's supply of inventory is one of the most important metrics on this graph. When I talk about month's supply of inventory, this is the number that I use to determine are we in a buyer's market or a seller's market, and it's kind of like, well, duh, okay, we're in a seller's market, right? But how deep of a seller's market are we in? A balanced market occurs when we have about a 6-month supply of inventory. When we go below 3 months worth of inventory, it's considered to be an extreme seller's market. And when that number drops below 1, that means that we truly have more buyers in the market than homes to sell those folks. And when we look at the month supply of inventory, we're sitting at 0.4 months worth of inventory, which basically means that at the current rate of sales in 13 days, we're going to sell out of all of the existing inventory. That's how fast our market is moving this year. Looking at where the market is moving fastest is we are under 1 month worth of inventory all the way up to $2 million. So this isn't something that's relegated to the under $500,000 market. This is something that's happening at all price points across greater Metro Denver. Even when we're looking at the $2 to $3 million mark, we only have 1.3 homes available per buyer. When we get up into the $3 to $4 million range, we have 1.6 homes available per buyer. And as we get into the over $5 million market, we have 3 homes available per buyer. So this is happening at all price ranges where we're in this just extreme, chaotic, crazy seller's market where we're seeing oftentimes for homes that are selling for over $700,000, they're going for $100,000 over asking price minimum in most cases. When we break it out and look at it on a map, I want you to think about this like a wind chill factor map. Where does it feel hotter and where does it feel cooler as it relates to all of Metro Denver when we look at the average as a whole? On average, again, we had about 0.42 months worth of inventory or about 13 days worth of inventory. If the zip code turns red on this map, the market is going to feel more competitive than the average. And if it turns green or blue, it feels less competitive on average than what we're experiencing across Metro Denver. What you've noticed is that there's this kind of donut ring of opportunity, and I don't know if I have a laser pointer on this. Oh, I sure do. Oh my gosh, it's the best when there's a laser pointer on the clicker. Okay, so there's this donut ring of opportunity that exists around this inner landlocked ring suburbs where we're seeing this real suburban surge. Over the last few years since COVID struck, we've seen this really big trend of moving away from urban, densely populated areas into areas that have more rooms and can accommodate more space and working from home. And that's where people are moving out to the suburbs. In some of the most intense markets down here on the south side of town in Highlands Ranch and Lone Tree, we're sitting at about 6 days worth of inventory in those particular markets. So if you're looking in those markets, it's really challenging right now. But if you're a seller, woohoo, the world is your oyster at that point, because you've got all the buyers in the world out there that are after your property. Over here on the eastern side of Denver and the western edge of Aurora, where home prices tend to fall around the $400,000 price range, is also very hot. What we've seen is appreciation continues to skyrocket as there's downward pressure on lower price points where people can't afford to purchase a $750,000 home anymore, so they're now looking at $500,000 homes being pushed over into that eastern edge of Denver and the western edge of Aurora. As we get up into Montbello and Central Park, those are also about 6 average days or 6 days worth of inventory in the market. Arvada continues to be a little hot spot, and down here into Lakewood. Recently in Lakewood a few years ago, they put a growth cap initiative into place that limited the amount of construction that could come into those areas. And so with the limited construction that's coming into those areas, it's created a crunch within those particular markets. Now our Lodo market is our slowest market right now, but it's still sitting at 1.5 months worth of inventory, so it's still clearly in extreme seller's market territory. But it's going to feel a lot slower if you're working in Lodo than if you're trying to work down in Highlands Ranch and Lone Tree right now. Looking at, this one. Is anyone getting the bubble question still? Are we so tired of having this conversation? I talk about this every Friday at 10 o'clock when I do a weekly webinar for about 500 agents across Metro Denver. We're so far from a bubble, guys. There needs to be 3 different conditions that exist in order for a bubble to burst. We need to have an oversupply of properties, which we certainly don't have. We need to have a lack of equity in our market, which we certainly don't have. But we also have to suffer some sort of widespread financial hardship. And it could have happened with COVID when we went through the V-shaped recovery, but it didn't happen, and we came out of that in spades. None of those conditions exist. And in order for us to get even to a point where we were in a balanced market between buyers and sellers, we would need to have 18,000 total detached single-family homes available for sale. Again, we have about 1,300. So right now, we're sitting at about 7.3% of what we would require to offset demand. If I were to take that and add in the attached single-family homes, we need about 12,000 attached single-family homes. So to get to a point of a balanced market, we would need to have around 30,000 homes available for sale in Metro Denver, whereas right now we have about 2,200 total on an average daily basis. Looking at what's been happening with the odds of selling, the odds of selling is actually a little bit lower this year than what we were experiencing last year. Last year was really the crunch year for us. At this point last year, we were sitting at nearly 86% odds of selling, which is the highest I'd ever measured that pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, that number sat around about 61%. The odds of selling, for those of you who have taken Ninja training, it's a Ninja number that you guys use. I take into account all of the available listings for sale, and I compare that against what goes under contract and or closes in the same month. So again, as of this last month, we were sitting at 81.4% odds of selling. That number will likely climb as we go into April and May, and then usually what happens in June is we start to see pullback as our active inventory starts to rise. So the good news is more inventory is on the way. The odds of selling remained above 70% all the way up to $2 million. And so again, just skyrocketing crazy numbers putting put up in the luxury markets right now. Highest and best odds of selling still fall around that inner landlocked ring suburbs where we're really seeing that crunch where we were at 95.1% odds of selling as you got down into Lone Tree and into Highlands Ranch. Showing data, there were nearly 102,000 showings that were set in the month of March for detached single family alone, with another 40,000 showings that were set for attached single family. Now, what I wanted to show you is the total showable properties. When we talk about the total showable properties, this is actually if I wanted to take my client out, how many total listings were available to be shown during the month of March. And it's a lot higher than that 1,300 number that I spouted off a little bit earlier. There were 5,000 about 5,500 total showable properties for detached single family during the month of March. That means that my active month end count from the end of February plus any new listing that came on market that was available to be shown. So there's a lot more inventory out there than what we've been talking about. And when we look at that number, month over month, it went up by 33.2%. It's up 9.2% from where we were 1 year ago. So there's a lot more inventory out there than what we've been talking about. As we go through this really unprecedented period where it's very challenging for us to try and price properties appropriately, what you're looking at is sellers that really want to overprice their property and want to shoot for the moon because they know how deep of a seller's market it is. But if you're looking at one of those listings that's too hard and you're overpricing it, you really have to watch your showings very carefully. That's our best leading edge indicator right now. There's a great report that you can use that's out of Showing Time underneath reports called Target Market Analysis. And you can go in and put in your zip code and the last week worth of data, and it will tell you how many shows per property last week you should have received on a new listing that came out. So it's in Showing Time reports. Target Market Analysis is what you want to look at, but that's how you can tell how many shows per property you should have gotten. That could be strike one if you're not within your target range. But based off of showings that went up last month, you should have had 22.8 showings should have yielded you an offer. So if you hit 22.8 showings and you had no offers, that's probably indication number one that you were in a market where you might have been overpriced. Days on market, 71.4% of all the homes that closed in the month of March were under contract in 7 days or fewer. Again, 71.4% of those homes. That went down month over month by about 2.3% because we had some active inventory that made its way to market, and our pending transaction count actually slowed ever so slightly. Looking at where we're seeing the fastest transactions, again, those inner landlocked ring suburbs where we're seeing the fastest transactions, many of them sitting at 6 or 7 average days on market. The average overall for Metro Denver for the month of March was 14 when I combine both attached and detached residential. I think the big story here that we want to be talking about is what's happened with pricing and what we're looking at with multiple offers, and I'll end on that note. So looking at what's happened with our average pricing month over month, our average sales price came up again another 7.3%, just month over month. That means that our average sales price here in Metro Denver was $789,000 and some change. That means that we could be hitting $800,000 for an average sales price this year. We still have 3 more months of appreciation that are likely as we go into the next couple of months. What this graph shows is how our prices typically trend. If the bar is above the 0 mark, that means that prices are going up. And if the bar is below the 0 mark, that means that prices are going down month over month. And when we follow that trend, we still have 3 more months with typical appreciation here in Metro Denver. The last 2 months have been unprecedented we had a jump in February of 8.3% and in March of 7.3%. So again, year to date, we've seen appreciation that's already happened on the realm of 13 to 15% just so far this year alone. I read a really interesting statistic that talked about homeowners from last year, and that more homeowners made more money simply by owning their home than they did in their average day job. Looking at let's talk about multiple offers. I'll jump up to that really quick so that you guys can see that. But you guys will get a copy of every slide that I put together for you on a monthly basis. Based off of closings from the month of March, it was 77.7% of those listings sold for over their asking price or were in a multiple offer situation. We had 10.6% come in at a full price offer with 11.7% going for under asking price. And when I break it out for you by price range, the red bar represents the percentage of those listings that sold for over their asking price. All the way up to 1.5 million, it was basically 80% of all the homes were selling for over their asking price. When you get into the 1.5 to $2 million range, it was basically 2 out of every 3, and that rang true all the way up to 4 to 5 million. And then in the $5 million mark, it was 1 out of every 3 homes were selling for over their asking price. So multiple offers reign true. Now, if you are in a position where you're likely to see how far over asking price you have to go, for those homes that won multiple offers in the month of March and closed. For homes that were up to $1 million, you were looking at anywhere between 8.5 to 10% over asking price is what was winning those offers. As you go up into higher price points, 1 to 1.5 million was 12.8% over asking price, 1.5 to 2 million was 10.7% over asking price, and 2 to 3 million was coming in at about 7% over asking price was what was winning those multiple offers. Where we're seeing the most multiple offers is there's a very clear line of demarcation that runs down along I-25. If you're looking at homes that are on the west side of I-25, you're paying anywhere between 7 to 14% over asking price on average, versus on the east side of I-25, where homes tend to be a little bit less expensive, people have less money to go through and overbid in some of those homes. And so look more on the east side of I-25, you're looking at somewhere between 4 to 8% over asking price. So again, it's a challenging market out there. We've got about 6 to 8 weeks left of this really challenging market happening here in Metro Denver. As we get into June, we'll start to see active inventory rise. People will go on vacation and we'll have that traditional seasonal pullback. That also happens to coincide with the point where we saw interest rates spike up, and it usually takes about 6 months before interest rates spike up before us to start to see a cool down in the rate of appreciation here in our market. So I'm hopeful that that will all coincide with each other, and we'll start to see prices pulling back as you go into June, July, August, and September. Okay, so was this helpful information for you guys? Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for having me. I certainly appreciate it. And what people fail to recognize is that I'm actually just a title rep. I happen to put this together for you guys so that you have information where you can better advise your buyers and sellers. But what I certainly hope is that if I'm able to help you better advise your buyers and sellers, that you'll reach out to me for your next closing and bring that over to First American. If you're not currently getting copies of my slide decks every week, you can send me an email and I'll shoot you out a copy of my slide decks. My email address is maller, ALLER, at firstam.com. I've currently got about 7,000 agents that are on that distribution list where I send out weekly reports that give you the forecast for the previous week and upcoming weeks. So please get on my email list and I'll be happy to reach out to you and connect, and hopefully I'll see you at my closing table soon. Thanks, guys.